Hey, I'm Alex Racco from Board Game Co, and today I'm covering the expansion for Illiterati, Red Herrings and White Roses. Illiterati is a cooperative word game in which you're going to be attempting to solve various word challenges while facing off the Illiterati as they attack you, and Red Herrings and White Roses is the first expansion for it, introducing a bunch of new elements, of which I'm going to go over what those elements are, and then of course my thoughts and opinions on them, links and timestamps to everything down below. Speaking of links, I'll also have a link to the Kickstarter campaign down below, and everything you see here, well, most of the things you see here are prototype, rules and components subject to change. I say most because there's the new expansion elements, and then there's some things from the base game. These are like final production copy and all that. In any case, I will to a certain extent assume that you know the basic flow of Illiterati. I will tell you a general short overview of this, but this whole review and all that mostly assumes that you know the general idea of what Illiterati is and how it operates. If you do want the fast forward version of it, you're basically trying to work together to accomplish words. You're going to have a collective pool of letters that you're working with through your allies in this game, your teammates as you play through it. You're going to have a central library as well as the ability to work with the other players and borrow letters. Can I have that K? Can I have that heart letter? I really need those to complete my word. Because each player is going to have challenges, specific words with specific themes that they have to do. You have to have 8 letters with romantic theme words, different categories. You have to have, I don't know, 4 letters, 4 different words that are all verbs that you have to incorporate. You have to try to build a bunch of words and work with your teammates round after round to try to acquire the words and stand up to the Illiterati attacks. Because at the end of each round, you're going to draw a card from the Illiterati deck, which is going to have some sort of attack. If that Illiterati is already in play, it's actually going to stagger, having multiple attacks, which are going to slowly tear down your words, ripping apart letters, and making it harder for you to keep up, and possibly just making it so you're unable to accomplish what you need, and might have to burn some letters, and if you burn too many letters, you lose the game. Throughout this process, you're working your way through multiple books until you eventually have the final challenge book, which is a slightly harder version that all players have to tackle the same concept together and pass it in the same round. Basically, it's cooperative Scrabble, except it's not really Scrabble. It's word building. It's cooperative word building with restrictions and with the Illiterati who attack you. Now, White Roses and Red Herrings, or Red Herrings and White Roses, adds a few new elements. We're going to have the Unwritten, 2 specific characters who you are playing against, one of these characters who's going to be facing off against you with an additional suite of powers. I'll explain how those work shortly. You're going to have your literacy meter, which kind of replaces the difficulty in the game, giving you a changing difficulty that's going to respond to the game with things like how many letters you can draw, your word max, your library size, those different things, while protagonist powers, tracking those. It changes up the core difficulty settings of the game and has those things adjusting as the game happens. You're going to have more words and more books for the 2 basic categories of red and blue books, as well as 2 entirely new categories of books that you're going to utilize when you're facing off against the respective Unwritten, as well as a bunch of allies. Now, you don't have to color match over here. You're going to have various allies in the game, and you could mix and match from various things. The game suggests you match them to the respective Unwritten at first, but then mix and match as you want to have them in play. They're going to give you ways to spend words to have extra abilities to hopefully face off against the Unwritten and manage to hold your ground. Those are the core concepts of what's being added, but let's talk a bit more about how those work. As far as the Unwritten, you're going to have a single Unwritten who's going to be on a standee marching around the board amongst trying to put themselves in front of various players. You'll have the full category of 5 spots in each game, even if you're not playing at a full player count. So sometimes they'll be in front of an empty spot. That's going to feed into your strategy as they move it around, kind of issuing attacks. You're also going to be looking at the gem color of whoever the last Illiterati that was played that round, and then putting a matching gem onto that respective row of their ability, whichever matching color there is, and that's going to have them activating progressively stronger abilities as those abilities trigger and re-trigger. These abilities are going to do things like having more restrictions in your words, discarding letters, different kinds of attacks that are going to be happening, but basically, effectively, it's a new version of an attack. If you've played Illiterati, you're already used to having a core attack from these Unwritten, from the Illiterati, but instead you're going to have that combined with the Unwritten having an extra level of attack that's going to power up, as well as a placement aspect, because it does matter where they are on the board when they activate their attacks against other players or the empty spots or any of the adjacencies around those. That's going to be what the Unwritten add to the game. Then you're going to have the extra books. So let's cover the allies first. The allies specifically give you ways to spend letters in order to activate abilities. You can activate up to 2 abilities a turn, and there is kind of a refresh on those abilities. You can't activate the same ability 2 turns in a row, but past that, you can spend a 3+ ward, a 5+ ward, or a 6+ ward to do the respective ability of those allies. Whether they're going to affect this library over here, increasing your letter draw, your library size, whether they'll cleanse various negative effects, draw extra letters. They just give you different suites of abilities, and again, there are 6 different characters in play for these 2 matching sets, and you can mix and match as you want for these various allies that you have. Basically, the Unwritten are a new thing being thrown against you, and the allies give you additional tools at your disposal to take them out. And then lastly, outside of the literacy meter, which is kind of baked into the expansion, we're going to have the new books. We just have new books over here from the various basic books over here from the blue and red books. Again, if you play the base game, you're familiar with those as far as how they operate. But then we have the green and the pink boards that are the green and pink books that are respective to the various Unwritten to play against. Although, of course, you can incorporate them into any game you want. You don't have to have the Unwritten in play, but it gives you a sequence to work your way through. So instead, you're going to have additional round in the game. So instead of just having a red, a blue, then the finale, you'll have a red, blue, plus this respective green or pink, then the finale, and of course at harder difficulty levels that will actually be accelerated as well. But the green ones are going to offer kind of Scrabble, which I mentioned earlier. You have these kind of sets over here that you have to kind of create a tableau. Instead of creating, let's look at this one over here. Instead of creating 8+ letters with at least 3 hearts and things at a wedding, instead of having that kind of restriction, you have to create a little Scrabble board on the table in order to make that specific sequence with having a C over there. So you'll see, not a C, a consonant over there. Then you have consonants or vowels. You're trying to create these flows. Basically, it's just the same core concept of the game, but instead you're doing this based on specific structures that are more Scrabble adjacent. And then separately over here, not separately, the other category of books are going to have staggered heights. So for example, over here, you have things like this has to be at least 4 tall with a vowel, and then at least 3 tall. The idea being that you're trying to create something that works at different levels as you work your way down. For example, you could have book, followed by moon, followed by, soon. You're trying to work your way that as you remove the top letters of each of those, you have words that are still consistently viable, legal words, as you remove the top letters of each row, working your way down to the bottom stack, which forces you to think in layers, building words that are adaptable to the various categories, to the various structures that you're building. Those are going to be the new elements that are added to the game, which means it's time for my thoughts and opinions on this new expansion, what the various elements add, do I like them, do I not, all of that. Let's start with the easy one. More books of the basic books are great. Illiterati already has plenty of books, so having more red and blue, I don't think I needed them, but it's certainly nice to have. More variety is always a good thing. Regarding the green and pink books, those 2 new types, fantastic. I love having new thoughts, new ways to think through how you're going to build things. I almost wish they combined more elements. The consonant and vowel restriction is nice, but I almost wish it kind of had you build, and this would be very, very hard with the tiered words. I found the tiered words already a challenge. But maybe with the Scrabble words, having a themed around Scrabble, that could be strong to have that aspect. Like, oh, you have to build a Scrabble shape, but it has to be things you'd find at a zoo, which would be challenging to be sure because you're kind of putting 2 restrictions together. But I did find these Scrabble to be, I love the concept of what it's doing. I thought it was still a little bit open-ended, but it still is thought-provoking. I wish there was a different way to add to what it's doing. Same with the working your way down. I really liked the categories on the basic red and blue books in the game, and having that lack in the pink and green. I do like what they're adding. I think the variety is great. I wish there was a bit more drilling down, because otherwise they're almost like having a million Scrabble shapes over here. Is it really that meaningfully different to have these different shapes over here as you play through it? And for me, the answer I'd say is no. You're kind of approaching them in the same thought process as opposed to having to really think through, okay, things you'd find at a wedding or things you'd find at a restaurant. Those are categories that force you to rethink how you approach it. So I love the new books. I wish there was a drop more restriction to them. Even if it was like, I don't know, one of the words has to... however they do it. I like them. I wish there was more to them. The allies and the Unwritten, on the other hand, I'm kind of neutral on. I don't think they're bad. The allies are nice extra things to help you against the Unwritten. Let's talk about the Unwritten first, and then I'll get to the allies. The Unwritten kind of give you new threats that you're dealing with. The main problem I had with the Unwritten is I didn't find the threats that you're dealing with to be particularly creative. There are some things like face down letters you have to remember, so that's something new that you don't see from the basic Illiterati. But for the most part, I thought that it was just more of the same, just with more rules and complicatedness to how it works, as well as the kind of fiddliness of having that move around the table, including 2 empty spots. So for me, the Illiterati kind of already represent these attacks on your wards, and the Unwritten 90% feel like the same with an extra level of rules on top of it. It's not bad, I just didn't feel it's super added to the game, and maybe that could be changed if they were different as far as how they operate, but again, outside of like maybe 1 or 2 rules per Unwritten, it's a whole lot of text. There's all these various text boxes to go through, a whole lot of rules, not a whole lot, but like, you know, the extra rules aspect, and then for the most part, it didn't necessarily change the feeling I had playing the game. It felt like more of the same. I felt like I could have just added the difficulty level by just saying, hey, draw 2 Illiterati a turn and do that. That would have been a difficulty adjustment. I didn't feel they were super meaningfully different in the way they work their way into the game system. I love the idea of them, and they're not bad, but they didn't super enhance my experience. And then the allies kind of have the same general problem. I like the concept of the allies, and sometimes they are very fun to utilize an ability combo, or things like increasing the library size, that gives you a lot of flexibility. But for the most part, I did find that the allies just kind of have you spending wards to do things that didn't always feel super worth it. Again, sometimes they did. For the most part, it was this kind of nice to have concept that felt cool, but in practice, I was still spending 90% of my mental energy focusing on accomplishing the mission objectives that you have to fulfill those wards, and then the allies were kind of peripherally there to utilize as it became sometimes helpful to be like, oh, I have extra letters. Is there anything I can do to spend them on that might help us out? Look at that, I can increase the amount of letters we draw into the letter draw each turn. So again, not bad, but didn't meaningfully improve my experience. So overall for me, this expansion is a combination of things I really like, more cards, more book variety, I really enjoyed those, and then things that weren't bad at all. They were certainly not bad, but there's extra rules maintenance for things that didn't super enhance the experience, and felt like most of those were accomplished through the Illiterati already, with a new flavor twist to it. I think thematically, they feel a lot of fun. Mechanically, it was a little bit different and more of the same feeling with additional rules overhead. So for me, rating-wise, I'm going to come in at a 3.5 out of 5 on the expansion. For context, the base game of Illiterati, I give a 4 out of 5. I always rate expansions based on not the full package, but rather what that expansion adds. For me, this is a 3.5 out of 5. There are some things I really enjoyed, some things that I kind of might incorporate in some games and other times might leave behind. Overall, a decent expansion. If you're a huge fan of Illiterati, I definitely recommend adding to the experience you have. If Illiterati is one of those games that shows up on your table once or twice a year, I think this is one you can probably safely skip. In any case, and until next time, I'm Alex Radical from Board Game Co. Hope you found this review helpful, and as always, I hope you have a good one.